My name, Quinn Haley's, 28 years old, a financial risk management consultant. Though I was one of the youngest professionals at my Manhattan firm to my family, I was always just the useful little girl. That evening, the crystal chime above the dining table gave a gentle ring just as my father Victor, the patriarch of the family, leaned in and uttered the words, "We only invited you out of pity, Quinn, so don't stay long." We were in the penthouse, a lavish multi-million-dollar apartment overlooking Central Park, which my father treated as his own private kingdom, but which legally belonged to me. Every fork paused midair. My brother continued to swirl his expensive scotch, as if the words were directed at nobody in particular. My sister smirked contentedly, her eyes sweeping over my perfectly tailored but 3-year-old dress, with a look of pure contempt. Even my mother just stared down at her plate, avoiding eye contact. I felt my cheeks flush hot, but my hand remained steady, slowly raising my water glass. I smiled. It was a faint, quiet smile, more of a muscle contraction than an expression of amusement. I took a small sip, then calmly rose from the leather-upholstered chair. "Of course, Father. I understand," I said in a measured voice, and quietly left the room. No one stopped me. No one bothered to look up. They had achieved their goal, hurting me and making me disappear. But in just 1 week, they would all be forced to look up. They would be pulled into the financial chaos that I was about to create. The silence they demanded from me would very soon become the most terrifying sound they had ever heard. Before we dive into my story, tell me what time it is and what city you are watching from, so I know how far my story has traveled. If you have ever chosen to end a toxic relationship to reclaim your peace, please help me spread this story. Don't forget to subscribe and share your own story in the comments section. Immediately after the penthouse door closed, the silence of my small apartment wrapped around me, but it was no longer the silence of acceptance. It was the silence of calculation. I sank onto my old worn sofa, the one I bought myself after college, and let the truth sink in. The sheer arrogance of Victor's comment was stunning yet utterly predictable. I realized the family had not just used me, they had built their entire precarious life on the thin legal scaffolding that was my name. The $12 million penthouse wasn't Victor's kingdom. It was a conditional asset held in an irrevocable trust established by my paternal grandfather. Grandfather was a shrewd man who distrusted his own children's, especially Victor's, financial competence. The terms were clear: the primary residence was to be held by the family member with the most robust, verifiable financial career who could ensure the continuation of its substantial tax benefits. That person, of course, was me. I didn't live there because I knew the moment I moved in, I would lose the few remaining vestiges of independence I had left. My family, meanwhile, lived there rent-free, treating it as their birthright, constantly reminding me that I was merely the custodian of their luxury. They had always treated me like a poorly paid assistant whose sole function was to manage the complex property taxes and investment accounts necessary to maintain their lifestyle and the valuable tax-exempt status of the property. For years, I had quietly managed the accounts, ensuring the enormous annual property taxes were mitigated by various trusts and exemptions, a process that required my continuous oversight and professional certification. I was their golden goose laying the golden eggs of tax breaks, yet I was served charity water at their dinner table. I thought of Preston, 26 and still failing to hold a job, yet he drove a new sports car every year funded by Victor's loans against the family's future inheritance. I thought of Avery, whose entire social identity in the city revolved around the penthouse address and hosting exclusive charity functions there, never once offering to reimburse me for the administrative costs. The deepest cut, however, came from Eleanor, my mother. She was not malicious, just absent, always choosing Victor's side, the side of comfort and stability, rather than defending her own daughter. She was complicit in the emotional neglect, a silent participant in my exile. I had tried to talk to her about boundaries, about the hurtful comments, but she always deflected with the same tired phrase. It's just the way your father is, Quinn. You have to be the bigger person. The bigger person. I had been the bigger person for over a decade. Now being the bigger person meant I had to be the better professional, the better strategist. I had to use the one thing they valued about me, my financial acumen, to dismantle the very foundation of their arrogance. My grandfather had set up the trust to prevent Victor from squandering the wealth, but he hadn't accounted for Victor's capacity to use a family member as an unwitting proxy to bypass those safeguards. The penthouse was a beautiful gilded trap, and I was holding the key. I finally understood the full scope of my power. My financial control was the only relationship I truly had with them, and when that was gone, there would be nothing left to negotiate. The next move had to be swift, surgical, and absolutely final. I knew exactly where to strike. Only 2 days later, I received a barrage of notifications from the family group chat escalating the situation to an unacceptable level. The chat, predictably named Victor's Dynasty, was usually a source of low-level anxiety, but this time it was different. Preston was demanding that Eleanor buy a new, larger sectional sofa for the living room because his friends need more space for the Super Bowl party. Avery, ever the social climber, posted an album of photos from a rival's charity gala and demanded that Victor fund their upcoming golden anniversary party, which would celebrate Victor and Eleanor's 50 years together at the penthouse, specifically excluding me from the planning and the guest list, of course. The sheer audacity of planning a major event in my legally owned property, while simultaneously informing me I was only invited out of pity, made my blood run cold. They were not just emotionally abusing me. They were treating my assets and efforts as an unlimited resource for their self-aggrandizement. This wasn't just about a dinner. It was about erasing my financial identity while relying entirely upon it. I decided it was time to check the consolidated financial portal I maintained for the trust accounts. Logging in required my specific high-level credentials, which they did not possess. I started with the most routine check, the property tax escrow account. Everything seemed normal until I cross-referenced the property expenses with the investment portfolio's recent activity. My breath hitched. It wasn't just the pending annual tax payment that was delinquent. There were several substantial unauthorized transactions recorded. Victor and Preston, or more likely just Victor using Preston as a distraction, had liquidated a significant portion of the municipal bond fund. This wasn't a slush fund. This was the highly stable tax-advantaged portfolio specifically designed to cover the property's immense operating costs and secure the state's primary residence tax exemption, which was worth a massive amount of money annually. The withdrawal amount was nearly $750,000 executed over the last 2 months under the guise of portfolio rebalancing, which I knew for a fact I had not authorized. They had not only overspent their allowance, they had dipped into the principal designated for the trust's long-term stability and legal compliance. My professional mind instantly cataloged the implications. This was more than just a family falling out. This was a potential breach of trust terms, exposure to significant capital gains taxes due to premature liquidation, and worst of all, it jeopardized the property's tax exemption status. That exemption was tied to strict financial metrics and maintenance of the fund's stability. By recklessly withdrawing the principal, they were effectively setting off a ticking financial time bomb, a bomb that would ultimately blow up their entire lifestyle, and they were using my professional reputation as the shield. The realization was sickening. I wasn't just undervalued. I was being actively compromised and financially undermined to fuel their irresponsible desires. The thought that they would risk a $12 million asset and my professional license for Preston's new car and Avery's party funding solidified my resolve. I closed the laptop, the chill of the monitor's glass mirroring the cold clarity in my own eyes. Pity. They had used pity as a cover for outright financial treachery. The gloves were officially off. I knew I couldn't simply withdraw my name. I had to act decisively to both protect myself legally and deliver a consequence that was commensurate with their betrayal. I had to neutralize the threat and reclaim my life. I sat before my computer, the screen's cool light reflecting on my face, transforming me from a financial expert into an avenging strategist as I meticulously organized the scattered numbers in my head. My first move was to assess my legal standing. I reached out to Spencer, a sharp-minded real estate attorney I had known since law school, specializing in trust and property law, setting up an immediate consultation. I needed confirmation that my ability to sell the penthouse as the title holder, even under the grandfather's trust, was unimpeachable, particularly given Victor's clear breach of the trust's financial prudence clause. Spencer confirmed the trust's structure was ironclad. As the designated financial steward, my duty was to the asset's long-term value and tax compliance, not the beneficiary's whims. Victor's unauthorized liquidation was a massive breach of fiduciary responsibility, validating my right to dispose of the asset to prevent further catastrophic financial damage. The path was clear. I had the legal authority to sell. Next, I needed emotional grounding. I called Leo, my boyfriend, a kind and rational man who worked as a museum curator, but possessed an emotional intelligence far exceeding my family's combined IQ. I didn't mince words. I laid out the whole ugly truth, from the pity dinner to the $750,000 bond liquidation. Leo listened patiently, his response calm and unwavering. "Quinn, you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep them warm," he said, his voice a comforting anchor. "This isn't revenge. It's self-preservation. You protect your career, your finances, and your peace. I support you, whatever the decision." His unconditional support was the fuel I needed. I then called Reese, my closest friend and a senior analyst at my firm, giving her a sanitized professional version of the financial breach, a client who had jeopardized a trust. I needed her technical opinion on the tax implications of the bond liquidation. Reese quickly confirmed my worst fears. The premature sale of those tax-exempt municipal bonds would likely trigger substantial capital gains taxes for the trust, and critically, would almost certainly invalidate the primary residence tax exemption retroactively. The result would be a crippling bill from the Internal Revenue Service, potentially running into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, plus penalties and interest. Reese provided the exact legal codes and precedents, invaluable knowledge I would soon weaponize. My strategy coalesced. 1. Sell the penthouse immediately and discreetly. 2. Close all shared financial conduits to isolate the family. 3. Let the IRS and the state tax authorities deliver the final blow. I was not going to send a letter. I was going to let the entire U.S. tax system do the talking. I initiated contact with a specialized real estate brokerage known for handling high-value, fast-tracked private sales to anonymous LLCs. They understood the need for speed and zero public exposure. The asking price was aggressive, slightly below market, but the demand was speed, a closing within 7 days, cash only. The trap was set. They wanted me gone. They would get their wish, and they would learn the hard way that when the financial expert leaves, the entire financial structure collapses behind her. Exactly 3 days after the meeting with Spencer, I received an offer I couldn't refuse from a discreet real estate firm representing an anonymous limited liability company. The offer was all cash. The price was non-negotiable, but acceptable, and the closing timeline was set for 4 days later, completing the transaction within the 1-week deadline I had set after the infamous dinner. The speed was the most critical factor. I couldn't afford for Victor to get wind of the sale and attempt a last-minute legal maneuver to block it. While the legal machinery whirred into motion, I initiated the financial lockdown. I started by closing every joint account I shared with my parents, including the seemingly innocuous utility accounts they had convinced me to co-sign years ago for better credit history. I systematically revoked all digital access and canceled the auto payment mandates for the penthouse's exorbitant maintenance fees, property insurance, and homeowners association dues. For the first time in years, the automated flow of money that kept their comfortable life running smoothly stopped cold. I changed the mailing address for all essential documents, including the property tax and investment statements, diverting them straight to Spencer's office. This ensured the family would receive no immediate warning, only the ultimate consequences. The closing on the penthouse was an almost clinical affair, a sterile meeting in a downtown law office where I signed my name away from the property that had been both a source of shame and my biggest financial liability. The proceeds, a substantial amount, slightly exceeding $11 million after expenses, were immediately wired into a private, fully secured trust fund under my sole name, held in a different state. It was money I had earned the right to control, free from Victor's grasping influence. The penthouse was no longer theirs, and they didn't even know it. The initial tremor in their ecosystem came just hours after the sale finalized. My phone, which I had muted to focus on the closing, buzzed furiously with a chain of agitated texts in the Victor's Dynasty group. Avery was the first to panic. "Mom, why did the cleaning service cancel? They said the account was frozen. Did you forget to pay? I have the charity committee arriving tomorrow." Eleanor replied vaguely, blaming a glitch in the bank system. But then, Preston jumped in angry. "The internet is out." I was mid-game. "This is unacceptable, Dad. Fix it now." Victor, oblivious to the true scale of the disaster, simply messaged back, "I'll deal with it, Preston. Eleanor, call the bank tomorrow morning." Their casual assumption that any inconvenience was merely a temporary oversight, easily fixed by my presumed presence or my funds, fueled my detached satisfaction. They were still treating the symptoms, completely unaware that the cancer had just been removed, along with the entire organ. I smiled, deleted the chat thread from my view, and started preparing dinner in my quiet, humble, yet legally and financially free apartment. The wait was almost over. The first domino had fallen. A week after that dinner, my phone started ringing uncontrollably, but this time it was ringing with their panic, not my own anxiety. The small, manageable irritations from the canceled services had mushroomed into full-blown domestic crises. Preston had called multiple times, his voice escalating from annoyed to genuinely distressed. "Quinn, pick up. We can't even order takeout. All the credit cards linked to the trust are declined. What did you do with the main bank account? Is this some professional joke?" He was completely unequipped to deal with life outside of Victor's protective bubble. Avery's frustration was louder and more performative, aimed not at the financial loss, but at the social humiliation. She left a hysterical voicemail complaining that she couldn't use the penthouse address on her wedding anniversary invitations because the HOA had sent a nasty notice about delinquent fees. "My husband's family will think we're paupers, Quinn. This is your job. Fix the records now." Their entitlement was a wall of noise I could finally block out. I kept my phone muted and only communicated through my attorney Spencer, who began fielding Victor's increasingly aggressive emails demanding an explanation for the unlawful interference with his family's finances. The climax hit on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was meeting Leo for lunch, trying to explain the finer points of bond market volatility, when an email from Spencer landed in my inbox, the subject line starkly confirming the legal nightmare I had engineered. "Victor, Eleanor tax exemption revoked. IRS notification attached." My heart didn't race. Instead, it settled into a cold, hard rhythm of professional vindication. The state tax authority, alerted by the sudden, undocumented change in property ownership and the premature liquidation of the associated bond fund, had officially declared the penthouse no longer eligible for the primary residence tax exemption. This wasn't just a loss of future benefits. It was a retroactive revocation. The attachment from Spencer included the grim tally: Victor and Eleanor were now liable for all the taxes they had avoided over the past 3 years, plus interest and penalties. The total amount due to the Internal Revenue Service was an astounding, non-negotiable $800,000. This was the real hammer blow. Losing the penthouse was one thing. Facing the unforgiving U.S. tax system was another entirely. I immediately forwarded the document to Victor's personal email address with no text, no explanation, just the official government letterhead and the massive number in bold print. The silence after that email was deafening, lasting for perhaps 2 hours. Then my phone rang with Victor's name blazing across the screen. I finally answered. His voice was not commanding. It was raw, thin, and shaking with disbelief and terror. "Quinn, what is this? $800,000? This is a mistake. You need to call them. You need to fix this. Your grandfather's trust was supposed to protect us." I took a deep breath. The taste of victory far clearer than any fancy wine they had ever offered me. It was supposed to protect the asset, Victor, by requiring financial stability. Something you breached when you authorized the $750,000 withdrawal from the Muni Bond Fund. That action, coupled with the sale, voided the exemption. The letter isn't a mistake. It's the inevitable financial consequence of your greed. I fulfilled my duty to the trust by selling the asset to prevent further damage. Your liability is entirely separate. I hung up before he could articulate another threat, the heavy number $800,000 echoing in my mind, a price tag for their arrogance, and the final undeniable proof that I was no longer the one paying for their mistakes. The chaos was complete. The doorbell of my small apartment rang with a heavy, insistent sound, carrying not the weight of former authority, but raw, desperate fury. It was Friday a week and 2 days after the dinner. I knew it would be Victor. No one else in the family would dare leave Manhattan for my humble corner of Brooklyn, unless the situation was truly dire. I checked the peephole. He looked like a shadow of the man who had effortlessly told me I was invited out of pity. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face pale and etched with sleepless anxiety. I opened the door deliberately, standing in the frame, not inviting him in. "I told you to communicate through Spencer, Victor." I stated, my voice calm and professional. He lunged slightly, forcing his way past me, but I stepped aside just enough to let him stumble into the small foyer. "Don't you dare talk to me about Spencer. That bloodsucker, what have you done, Quinn? You've destroyed us. I told you to fix the tax issue, not bankrupt the family." Victor was shouting, his facade of control completely shattered. I closed the door softly and leaned against it, observing the man who had controlled my life for nearly 3 decades. "I fixed the issue by mitigating the risk you created. You violated the terms of the trust by liquidating the municipal bond fund. That was an action of reckless financial mismanagement. As the designated steward, my obligation was to the long-term stability of the asset, which meant selling it before you could inflict further damage." He scoffed, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. "Damage. The money was going to Preston. We needed liquidity. You have a multi-million-dollar fund under your control. You could have moved the money. You could have paid the taxes yourself." I let him rage for a moment, then cut him off with the precision of a scalpel. "I did move the money, Victor. The proceeds of the penthouse sale, all $11 million, are now secured in a trust that you, Eleanor, Preston and Avery, have absolutely no access to. As for the taxes, you owe the $800,000 that is a personal liability triggered by your actions, specifically the bond liquidation that invalidated the tax exemption retroactively. That liability belongs to you and Eleanor as the financial beneficiaries of the funds you illegally accessed." Victor stared at me, his eyes wide and vacant. "Illegal? What are you talking about?" "The liquidation was unauthorized. I have the signed documentation from the initial portfolio setup, and Spencer has already filed an official report with the state on the breach of fiduciary duty concerning the bond fund. That fund was protected for tax purposes. You didn't just spend money, you committed tax fraud." "I'm not fixing the IRS letter, Victor. You are facing the consequences of your own financial recklessness. Consequences that I, the pity invitee, warned you about for years. He reached out his hand shaking, attempting to grasp my arm. Quinn, please, we're your family. Your mother is hysterical. We need the money from the sale to pay the taxes. We have nothing left. I took a deliberate step back, denying him even the smallest physical contact. You have your other assets, Victor. The cabin in the Hamptons, the 2 separate investment accounts you keep hidden from the trust. You always had an exit strategy, you just didn't think you'd need it this soon. I have zero obligation to fund your escape from a problem you created. My sole purpose for you is over. I reached onto the counter and picked up a large sealed envelope. This is a final communication from Spencer. It outlines the tax liens, the penalties, and the path forward with the IRS. It also includes a formal legal notice stating that all ties between you and the new trust controlling the sale proceeds are permanently severed. This is goodbye, Victor. I dropped the envelope into his chest. He staggered back, clutching the paper, the finality of the situation crushing him. He tried to speak, but only a choked whisper escaped. You will regret this. No, I said, meeting his defeated gaze with steady resolution. I will sleep well tonight. You are the one who will be facing the consequences of your choices. Now please leave. I waited until he slowly turned and shuffled out, closing the door and locking the deadbolt with a solid, satisfying click. After the door slammed shut, the silence I finally earned did not carry the weight of loneliness, but the sound of absolute freedom. That night, I called Leo. He came over and we ordered cheap takeout, eating it straight from the containers while sitting on my old sofa. I told him every detail of the confrontation, not with anger, but with clinical detachment. He didn't offer praise, just the simple, true acknowledgement. You did the right thing for yourself, Quinn. You secured your future. That was the only validation I ever needed. My life immediately gained a lightness it hadn't known before. I was free from the monthly maintenance reports, the quarterly tax reviews, and the constant soul-crushing anxiety of being used. I could finally focus completely on my demanding, fulfilling career and the future I was building with Leo, a future unencumbered by toxic obligation. The consequences for the rest of my family were swift and brutally realistic. Victor and Eleanor tried every legal avenue to challenge the sale and the tax liability, but Spencer's airtight strategy held firm. They were forced to sell their smaller secondary properties, including the beloved Hamptons cabin, at fire sale prices, just to cover the $800,000 tax bill and the accrued penalties. Victor, his reputation permanently tarnished among his small circle of wealthy associates by the IRS investigation, could no longer maintain his exclusive country club membership or his arrogant lifestyle. They moved into a modest condo in New Jersey, a significant step down from the penthouse views. Their relationship, built on shared financial status, crumbled under the pressure of real debt and loss. Preston was the most unprepared for the shock. The financial tap was abruptly shut off. He lost his car, couldn't afford the penthouse-level rent he'd grown accustomed to, and without his father's financial backing, he was forced to take a low-paying job to cover his own substantial credit card debt. His royal identity vanished overnight. Avery faced a different kind of consequence. Her husband, a pragmatic man focused on net worth, launched a furious internal audit when he realized the entire penthouse social hub was gone, along with the family's supposed wealth. The ensuing argument centered on Avery's poor judgment and reliance on her now disgraced father, significantly cooled their marriage, costing her the social standing she valued more than anything. I never heard from any of them again, except for one certified letter from Eleanor months later, not an apology, but a bitter, brief note accusing me of ruining her golden years. I burned the letter not out of rage, but as a final cleansing act. This story is not about revenge. It's about choosing yourself. It's about recognizing that some relationships, even family ones, are built on a ledger, not love. When the cost of maintaining that ledger exceeds the value of your self-respect, you have the right, the obligation to cut the cord. I lost a family that never truly existed, but I gained my life, my peace, and a financial future built on my own merit, free from their toxic demands. My lesson is this: if your family only invites you out of pity, take their pity, and then take back everything you gave them. True freedom isn't the size of your bank account. It's the quiet assurance that your life is yours and yours alone.